important. So, so welcome to the Grove, and welcome to an evening with another evening with me and Liz. We've been doing all kinds of videos, super fun. But Liz typically does a women's spotlight, and so we're going to give her the floor to do a women's spotlight, just to look into the Bible and see what one woman in the Bible is all about. So, Liz, fill us with knowledge and learn us well.
All right. So when Amy said one woman, that wasn't really super accurate for this time, because I actually want to tell you about 5 sisters. So usually I just pick one, but these 5 sisters were all acting together to do some really great things. So I wanted to talk about all of them. I reached all the way back into Numbers. So if you're not an Old Testament person, maybe this is the first time you've heard this story. I'm actually going to read it to you guys because it's really, really interesting. So these are 5 sisters. They're Mala, Noah, Hogla, Mikla, Tirzah. And they are all the daughters of a guy named Zelophehad. Okay, so names were different back then. So it says, the daughters of Zelophehad approached. Zelophehad was the son of Hepner, son of Gilead, son of Miknah, son of Masnah, from the clan of Manasseh, the son of Joseph. So these are like, all of these clans have been going on. So they drew near, these daughters of Zelophehad, and they stood before Moses. And they said, our father has died in the wilderness. He was not among the company of those who gathered themselves together against the Lord. So their father had died. He hadn't done whatever all these other people had done that was wrong. And they said, he has no sons. So why should the name of our father be taken away from his clans because he had no sons? Give us the possessions among our father's brothers. So these women basically said, and I'm in Numbers 27. So these women basically said, I know there's a rule that property has to be passed down to the son, but look, our dad died. He didn't do anything wrong. We want to bring on his legacy. So Moses actually brought their case before the Lord, because that's what he did back then. He actually would go into the temple and he could talk to God. And the Lord said to Moses, the daughters of Zelophehad are right. You shall give them possessions of an inheritance among their father's brothers and transfer the inheritance of their father to them. And you shall speak to the people of Israel, saying, if a man dies and has no son, then you shall transfer his inheritance to his daughters. And if he has no daughters, then you shall give his inheritance to his brothers. And if he has no brothers, you shall give it to his father's brothers. And it kind of goes on from there. But the reason that I wanted to point out these 5 sisters was they realized that there was an injustice and they wanted to carry on the legacy of their family and their people. And it wasn't legal at the time for that to happen. And so they had the courage to go together to Moses, who took their request to God. And God said, these 5 girls have got it right. We're going to change this law. And so I just wanted to tell you that story because women actually do have a lot of power to come together and change things, including laws. And when we're talking about things tonight, like women trafficking, there's a huge precedent in the Bible for women standing up against things that they don't think are right and being able to make changes. And so I wanted you to know there are 5 sisters, and that's what they did. And the Lord said, you know what? I am on the side of those 5 sisters. So next time you think about something and you think, that doesn't sound right, I don't feel like things should be that way, don't be afraid to speak up and take your case to somebody, because you actually just might be right.
That's so good. It's interesting that you're talking about that, because that is definitely one of the things we're going to talk about at the end, is that we can stand up and get laws changed. That's one of the things we really need to bond together and do. So we can talk about that for sure later as one of the things. So good job, Liz. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. I want to open up this topic. We're going to be talking about human trafficking and sex trafficking. And this is, as we look kind of into our own community, I don't want to be ignorant or aloof of the abuse that is happening. And I don't want also to sit and allow this to continue. This topic is highly uncomfortable. It is horrendous. It is disturbing. It is brutal. It's scary. And it's something we just can't afford to ignore in our culture. It's an issue that we must change our culture before anything can really be done. And so I want not only to understand, but that I want to understand that it starts with us and that we have this role in being able to change our culture and all of the people around us, because it's going to start with our circle of influence in our community. I also want to be sure that because it's so disturbing, it almost initiates a violent response. It's a violent emotional response, and we actually want violence back. And so I want to be careful, and I want to keep our emotions in check, because this isn't going to help if we're only violent in our response. We need to be strategic, and we need to be ready, and we need to have our own steadiness and our own faith in order so that we can have the Holy Spirit help us walk through this. So Mother Teresa said, if you want to change the world, go home and love your family. Mm-hmm. That's how we get to change our culture. And I think that a lot of us truly get stuck in the overall magnitude of the problem. The moment we open this door, it becomes a huge plethora of information and a huge plethora of emotions. And so I'm hoping that we not only love our families, but we learn how to engage this in a conversation that is very healthy. And that would bring awareness. God is truly in the soul business. And what we're talking about tonight is about souls. Yes, statistics matter, and numbers matter, and testimonies matter. But what we're really talking about is we're talking about people, we're talking about souls. And God is in the soul restoration business. And I want to make sure that we stand, or we march, we take responsibility for what we can, we build awareness, we don't ignore. And that we have an understanding so that we can move forward in the topic of human trafficking. And so that's what we're doing tonight. And I feel really good that we're just here to bring awareness and to just open this topic up. So with that, I want to say welcome to Robin Smith, who I have known for a few years now. And I want you to know a little bit something about Robin, is that Robin is an incredible person, first of all. She's really super smart, but she's also the one who I call when something is usually going really wrong in my life. And I call her and I'm like, oh God, Robin, I need help. Please help me. And she's like, okay, girl, okay, let's talk to Jesus about this. So I just want you to know that this is somebody in my life who I absolutely care about. I absolutely respect Robin. I absolutely respect your opinion. And I'm ecstatic that we get to have this conversation and that you are going to lay some things out and we get to bring awareness to this. So with that, please welcome Robin Smith.
Oh, thank you. So I'll just say a funny little story before we begin diving into this topic. So it's very ironic to me that Amy and I are kind of two peas in a pod, and we're wired the same way. And neither one of us have any affinity or great love or anything for traditional women's ministry. And here we are, Amy leading a women's ministry and me working every day in women's ministry. God is so stinking funny how he just kind of says, oh, you don't like that? Let me give you more. So we're character building each other as we go. And we've learned that we really absolutely love women's ministry because we love women and we love serving and working with women. So it's just funny to me how we've come full circle with our, we will never do women's ministry.
God definitely has a sense of humor.
Right.
Sure.
So surely does. So Amy, do I share my screen or do you share my screen?
Go ahead. You can go ahead and share your screen.
That means I have to find it, right? Oh, hopefully this will, how do I do this? I do this. Hang on.
Yep.
This might just take me one little second here. So I gotta move all these panels out of the way. There we go. Yeah. Well, we'll put him there. Okay. So I'm so not used to this little system. Where's the, oh, here we go, right? Yeah. Okay, we got it. Oh, I'm at the very end. Perfect. Oh, I'm so sorry, you guys. I should have had this all queued up and ready to go. There.
Heyo.
All right, now we're good. So we're gonna do this poll question to get us started. So Amy, can you do that poll question?
Yes, I am going to ask a question and I'm going to launch that. Now, just so that everybody knows, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Just so that everybody knows, this poll is anonymous. So once you can see that, you can go ahead and start answering, but nobody knows your answer. So
can you make it be question 3 instead of question 1?
Yep.
Or do you?
Okay. Well, we're just going to keep polling, I guess. All right. We've just got a few more people.
Okay.
All right. I think we have a phone caller too. All right. Let's see. Hold on. All right. Let's try this poll too. Go ahead. This is also anonymous. Do you feel like you can make a difference in this area? Can you see the answers there? Robin?
No, I only see the questions.
Okay. Well, we have most everybody saying, I want to make a difference.
Awesome.
And we have most people that say, yes, we can make a difference. And just a couple that say no.
Okay, awesome.
Yep.
Great. All right. So I wanted to start with asking that question because oftentimes when we talk about a topic, you can close that.
All right.
When we talk about a topic that's as big as human trafficking or sex trafficking, it feels like it is just so much bigger than we are, that like, what could we ever do, right? It just feels so overwhelming. And so I just wanted to start with that to see like, where are we all at on that? Do we think we can make a difference? Do we even feel like it's something that's manageable? And I want to just share with you my story a little bit about how I got involved with Refuge for Women and how I got involved in this world of sex trafficking. So several years ago, like 10-ish, or maybe even more, I was working in Michigan at a Christian university, and part of my job was student leadership. So every year for spring break, I would bring a group of student leaders to Las Vegas for spring break to do a missions trip. And we would work with different nonprofits in Las Vegas and do lots of different ministries. And one of those nonprofits that we worked with was a group that worked with trafficking survivors. And so that was my initial exposure to this world of sex trafficking. And every year we would come out and we would work with this group, and we would do a prayer walk on the strip while they handed out love bags to women. And it just became something that God just kept pulling and tugging at my heart. Like, there's something that you can do to serve in this area. But I knew nothing about sex trafficking. I was born in Iowa, raised in a small town, very conservative, very Midwest. I felt like this was just a world that I had no idea what it was or how to even enter into it. And the leader of that nonprofit said to me after about maybe the 5th year of bringing students out on these trips, she said to me, "Robin, you do not need to go to Las Vegas to be involved in the sex industry, because you have this problem in your town too. You can do something right where you are." And I was like, no way. I live in a really small town in Michigan, and there's no way. Like, we do not have this problem. That's how blind I was to what was going on. So I went home that year from that trip, and I went home with new eyes, and I started looking at my town through a new lens of, do we really have this problem? Is there trafficking happening in my backyard, or is it only in Las Vegas? Sin City, that's only where it happens. And I started to see things that I had never seen before, because I don't know if I was just naive or I just chose not to see them. But all of a sudden, God was opening my eyes, and I started to see the women in my community who were stuck in the sex industry, who were trapped in working in the sex industry, who were being trafficked or even doing it by their own choices, but yet it's an entrapment. And so that started me on a journey of, what can I do in my town? I don't have to go to Vegas. What can I do in this little town in Michigan? And 3 years later, after coming back to Vegas every year for a spring break trip, my friends saying to me, go home and do something, me going home and looking around and doing nothing, because I was a big fat chicken and I didn't know what to do. So I sat there. 3 years later, it was in October, and I met with the pastor of my church, and I said, hey, I really want to do something. This has been tugging on my heart. And I said, but I don't know what to do. And I'm trying to figure it all out. And he stopped me dead in my tracks. And he said, Robin, why do you have to have all of the answers? Just be willing to get messy. Just go, do something. And if it doesn't work, tweak it and do something else. Just start. And so I gathered my girlfriends who were in my small group, and I said, hey, this is what I want to do. I want to go into these strip clubs. I want to love on the women. I want to just be the hands and feet of Jesus to them. I don't know what that looks like, but will you go with me? And every one of them to a fault said, yes, we're in. We'll go with you. That was in October. Fast forward, now it's December. It's the Sunday before Christmas, and I still have done nothing, but I have a plan, because I'm a planner. And we're sitting in church on that Christmas Sunday morning, the Sunday before Christmas. And my pastor was telling this story about how he's a sci-fi geek. He writes sci-fi novels, and him and a buddy were at a sci-fi convention in Chicago. And they walked into the expo center, and his buddy said to him, we are the only light in a very dark place. And when he said that, it's the only time in my life that I literally heard the voice of God say to me, what are you doing? Because you have the light and you're sitting on your duff in church. And I got in the car after church, and I looked at my husband and I said, I need you to make a phone call and call the strip club and ask them if I can come in on Christmas Eve and bring gifts to the dancers. And we went home, and he called, and they said, sure. Like, who knew? And so I called my friends and I said, we're going. Christmas Eve, we're going. So that Christmas Eve, before we went to church, we went to the strip clubs, and we started passing out gifts and loving on the women. And it launched a ministry that is still going strong today back in Michigan called Hearts for Jackson, where every single major holiday and at least once a month, a group of women go into the clubs and just meet the women where they are, give them a gift, small as it may be. It's just a token that says, we see you, we value you, we love you, and we are here for you. And it just launched this ministry. So I tell you that story, and I ask you that question just to get you thinking about what you can do, because this problem is not too big for the church to solve, because we have Jesus, and that's the solution. And so I want us to approach this topic tonight as we're talking about sex trafficking and what that looks like. I want us to approach it through the lens of the fact that we can do something about it. We can we can bring hope and healing to the world, because that's what Jesus calls us to do. So that just tells you a little bit about me and where we're going with this. Amy, is it possible to get that poll off the screen?
Sure.
Oh, maybe that's on my end. Never mind. I think that was on my end. So it's gone. Anyway. All right. So let's dive in. There, it just tells you a little bit of the things that we're going to talk about. I'm going to tell you up front that I have so much information in this PowerPoint that we are not going to talk about all of this, because there's tons of it. But I just want to get a lot of the basic information out there. And then I want to leave space for you all to ask questions and to really dive into the areas that are really important to you. So, but we're going to go through some of this just because it's good information for us to have. Oh, why is this not advancing? Oh, there we go. So this is the legal definition of human trafficking according to our government. So there's a difference between labor trafficking and sex trafficking. And I just want to highlight three things. When we're talking about trafficking, these three things must be present. If they are not present, it is not legally trafficking. So whether it's labor trafficking or sex trafficking, it must involve force, fraud, or coercion. And that's just really important to know, because a lot of times people will use the word trafficking, but it's not used appropriately. So it does have to involve force, fraud, or coercion. And we're going to jump into what that looks like. The exception to that is for minors. If you are under the age of 18, there does not need to be force, fraud, or coercion involved. If you are under the age of 18 and you are making an exchange for an act of sex, it is legally trafficking. And so that's important to just understand that difference. So force, fraud, and coercion. So force is any type of threat that is used against a person, a threat of harm or like physically restraining, that's force. Fraud is anything that deceives you, that can be deemed a fraudulent act. And then coercion is when there is a threat of abuse, or you're literally forced or coerced into doing something that goes against your will. So that's the definition by our federal government of force, fraud, or coercion. And then the Commercial Sex Act is anything that is an exchange that has value for a sexual act. And so if those things are involved, it is considered trafficking. So here are some examples of what force looks like. Beating or slapping, beating with an object, burning, sexual assault, rape, confinement, and physical restraint. If that is present in any way, that is considered trafficking. If there is a false promise, deceitful, enticing, I love that statement, I will love you if you do this for me. You can hear the manipulation in those statements. If you're lied to about what your working conditions are going to be, or lied to about a payment that you will receive or a promise of a better life, that is trafficking. And then coercion is that intimidation. If you're humiliated, intimidated, manipulated, emotional abuse, all of that falls under the definition of being trafficked. So we're not going to go through all of these, but there are a lot of terms that are used in the world of trafficking that it is super important, if you're ever working with survivors, that you understand the language, because some of those terms we use on a regular basis, but they don't mean the same thing. And so we have to know what they mean. It is kind of good if you're a parent to understand or familiarize yourself with these words, because if you hear your children starting to use these words, you red flag should be going off in your mind. In jumping in to be a part of that conversation. So I'll give you an example. This one's kind of funny, kind of embarrassing, but kind of funny. It was something that just happened this morning. I was leaving the house to go over to our safe house. And as I was walking out the door, my husband said, he hollered at me, he goes, "See you later, wifey." And I turned around and I said, "Oh no, we don't use that term, because wifey is a term used in sex trafficking." And so we had a little mini educational session in our garage this morning about why it is inappropriate to refer to somebody as wifey, because it means something completely different in the world of sex trafficking. So that's why sometimes it's important to pay attention to terms, because they do mean a lot of different things. yeah, so there's several of them listed on the screens that you can read about what words mean. But I do want to point a couple out on this page because I think it helps us to understand what the climate and the culture for a trafficked woman looks like. So if you look down on this slide toward the bottom, there's a word, it says stable. And that's the pimp's groups of girls that only work for him. So these girls only work for one pimp and they are considered in his stable. So when you hear that, what does your mind think? When we say stable, what do we think of? We think of animals, right? Horses, barn, whatever. That so greatly depicts what the culture of the trafficking world looks like. Women are not women. They are not people. They do not have value. They are like animals that are hoarded around from stall to stall. And that's how they're treated. That's how they're looked at. That's how the impression is of them. So that's not true at all, but that's the world that they live in. And even the terminology that pimps use with each other, it just reinforces that. So if you are a woman who's being trafficked and you're being referred to that way, you're being labeled that way, you're being treated that way, it's only a matter of time before that's how you see yourself. And that's how you come to identify yourself. So in the work that we do at Refuge for Women, we're walking through life with women who are coming out of trafficking. That's one of the things that is the toughest part of our job, is we have to completely change the mindset of the women who come to us, because when they walk through our doors, they see themselves as animals, lower than, less than, worthy of a stable. Like that is literally how they see themselves, because that's how they've been groomed to think of themselves. And so, yeah, just super important that we understand the terminology and how women are treated in this world. So we have this second poll question. Amy, can we throw that one up there quick? Or was that the first one that you put up? Okay.
Here's this poll question. Do you know anyone who has been trafficked? Got a few people coming in. We've got the majority of people that are saying no.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
So we have a few people who do know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
It is amazing that most, and we'll get to some of these stats later on, but most children and women who are trafficked in the sex industry are trafficked by someone they know. That's what we have learned, is that most women are trafficked by a family member, a close friend of the family, or someone they know, of a friend that they have. So oftentimes we have in our mind that trafficking looks like the movie Taken, where someone is, kidnapped from a foreign country or whatever, but that does happen, but that's not the norm. That's not the norm at all. So it's definitely in our backyards. It's happening in our backyards.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to look at that. So let's look at some myths of sex trafficking. The first myth is that human trafficking does not occur in the United States. It only happens in other countries. We know that's not true. It exists in every country. It's nationwide, it's in cities, it's in suburbs, it's everywhere. And I'm positive it is in your community too, because it's everywhere. Myth number 2, human trafficking victims are only foreign-born individuals and those who are poor. Certainly not true. We know that there's no discriminator in the trafficking world. Everyone is subject to it. It doesn't matter your age, your race, your gender, or your nationality. And it crosses all socioeconomical groups. I want to tell you a story that is why it is so important that we, the church, are paying attention to this. This is so fresh for me. This literally just happened last week. So my husband and I have a real good friend here in Vegas, and he called and they go to one of our church partners that we have with Refuge for Women. They're members of that church. And he called and he said, I cannot believe what I've just walked through this week. And we're like, what's going on? And he said, my daughter, who's 16 years old, 15 turning 16, said their family is really, really tight. And he said she wanted to get a job. So we let her get a job, and she got a job at this burger place right down the street from the church. And she started working, and he said, I started watching her change right before my eyes. Like she wasn't my little girl anymore. Things were changing. And he said, so I was talking with her and I decided I'm going to go into work and see what's going on. So he went to the place where she works, and the boss came out, super friendly, sat down, talked with them, engaged in a lot of conversation, but he just felt like something's wrong. There's something not right about this. And so he went home, and later that night, he gets a knock on the door, and it's the police. And the police came because his daughter reported that he was sexually abusing her. The dad was sexually abusing her. And he's like, what? Like, what is happening? And so he started talking to the police officer, and they quickly realized none of this was true, none of it. And so they're having this conversation, and they went back and did an investigation. And then our friend grabbed their daughter's cell phone and started looking through it. And there were all these texts from her boss at the burger place. And this was on a Thursday. And on the last text said, well, tomorrow night we're going to this party, and then I'll introduce you to some of my friends. And she was being groomed by her boss at a hamburger joint right down the street from the church, and getting ready to be turned out on Friday night. And if she would have gone to that party with him, she would have been gone. That'd have been it. And so the police ended up going in and shutting down the burger place, arresting the guy, and it's all under investigation right now. But victims of sex trafficking are your neighbors. They are in your church. They are solid family people. It shows no discrimination, trafficking. It doesn't matter. So it's just a myth that we think it only happens to certain people, or it only happens to bad girls, or it only happens to fill in the blank. It's just not true. It can be happening right next door, and we don't often know. Human trafficking is only sex trafficking. That's not true. There's also labor trafficking. There's all kinds of trafficking that happens. The majority of trafficking is sex trafficking, though. That is true. Victims are found in legitimate and illegitimate labor industries. So there's a lot of labor trafficking that happens. And it lists on here several of the areas where labor trafficking can happen. And so remember, if you are forced to do it through fraud or coerced to do it, it's trafficking. So all of that comes into play. Another myth is that individuals must be forced or coerced into commercial sex acts to be victims of human trafficking. That is not true because of minors. So minors, there does not have to be force or coercion. We talked about that at the beginning. And then human trafficking and human smuggling is the same thing. That's not true either. Trafficking can happen right here in your city, and the people who are being trafficked might even live in their own home, and they still could be trafficked. Smuggling is when you cross a border. So you don't have to cross into another state in order for it to be trafficking, or into another country. It can happen literally right in your backyard. And then this one's really important. Human trafficking victims will attempt to seek help when in public. That will rarely happen because trafficking is such a hidden crime. We don't know how big it is. It's all done underground. So a victim, remember, there's force, fraud, and coercion in trafficking. So if a victim is being threatened with her life, or her family is being threatened, when she goes out in public, the last thing she's going to do is tell somebody that she needs help. Because in her mind, if I tell you that I need help, my family is going to get killed, or I'm going to get beat when I get home. So like, it's just very rare that a trafficking victim will come forward and ask for help, because when they're being trafficked, they're being held through force, fraud, or coercion. So them coming forward to share what they're struggling with is not going to happen. So here's just some questions for you to think about. Have you seen any of these myths or these facts play out in Kingman? Like, did anything come to mind as we were going through what trafficking truly is? And then how do the facts bring clarity to your personal vision for helping? I don't know, Amy, if you want us to dive in and maybe give people an opportunity to answer some of those questions or just be thinking about it as we keep rolling on.
Yeah, I think that it would be good to kind of marinate in this for a little bit. I know that while you've been talking, for me, I've been writing just some of the things that have stood out to me, and being able to just kind of take this in, because I think that the myths are, something that we just don't know.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so being able to go, okay, well, does this bring clarity to my personal vision for helping? Yes. And then what am I going to do with that?
Mm-hmm.
So I would love for a couple people to be thinking about these things. And then after we're done here, it would be great to maybe have a couple of people chime in on this.
Yeah. Perfect. Perfect. All right. So how does trafficking happen? We get asked that question a lot at Refuge for Women. We're asked, like, how did that woman find herself in that position? Or why didn't she do something to get out of that position? And those questions all come from just not understanding what trafficking really is and how it really impacts people. So going through this next section, I think is just really helpful in understanding how someone can find themselves in a situation where they are trafficked. And I really want you to pay attention to this section, especially if you have teenage girls or middle school girls, because you will really see the correlation of how a girl can be manipulated into a trafficking situation. So here is how a pimp gains control, how he recruits and how he gains control over someone. The first thing is isolation. As soon as you are cut off from your family, as soon as you are isolated from your friends, it's so easy to be manipulated and to have your mind start to be taught to think differently than how you think. So isolation is a huge part of recruitment and pimp control. When you don't have access to your support, when you don't have access to your resources, if you're taken to a new location and you don't know where you are, you feel totally under the control of the person who has you. And so that's a way that they gain real quick control. Economic dependence. If you're not allowed to go to school, if you're not allowed to hold your own money, you're dependent on the person who's taking care of you. And that's an easy way for them to do control. So purposeful manipulation. A pimp will learn what someone's insecurities are, and then they will exploit those insecurities, and that's how they gain control over someone. We had a resident one time in our program who was approached by a pimp at Walmart when we were out doing grocery shopping. And she asked me, she said, how does he know? Like, how did that guy know where I'm at? And I'm like, I hate to say this, but it's because oftentimes we wear our vulnerability on our sleeve and everybody knows, like, oh, we're miserable or we're sad, or you can tell, like, I don't ever look up, I always look down. Oh, you're insecure. They can see that. They're trained to read that in people and they exploit that. And that's how they gain control. So those things are just really important. That last one on here, as a pimp maybe will get to know a girl, when he finds out that there's a gap in her family structure, he's going after that because that's a way to gain control, such as like an absent father. Then he steps in and he becomes the father figure. And that's a way of gaining control. So those are like mind game ways of gaining control. The rest of these are more physical. So sexual violence is a way of controlling, and physical violence is a way of controlling. And oftentimes the thing with physical violence is it often is done to the girl, but it often is done as a threat to the people that she loves. And that's a way of gaining control. If you don't do this, I will hurt your mom. If you don't do this, I will get your brother. Things like that. Those are ways that they get in and gain control. And then emotional violence, again, that's that isolation. The roller coaster ride of heavy outpouring of affection versus violence, and then back to, oh, I love you, and then I beat you. Oh, I love you, and then I beat you. It's all breaking them down, breaking the woman down so that she submits to his control. So those are all things that are ways that pimps gain control over women. And then coercion and threats, we talked about that a little bit. So do we have time to watch this video, do you think?
Yeah, I don't see why not.
Okay, so this video is going to just show you a real good example of how a pimp does that with a girl. And I will tell you that it's pretty raw. So it's not graphic, but it is pretty raw. But it really shows you how vulnerable women can be, and especially younger women. And it also just shows you how the mind of a pimp works in manipulation. So it's called Erica's Truck Stop.
Soliciting for the purpose of prostitution, recruiting underage girls for the purpose of prostitution. Talk to me, Erica. What's going on here?
I had no choice. Alex made me do it. I did what he said, or I got beat up.
You think this is some kind of game? We need the money, bitch.
I don't want to go. I don't want to go.
I don't care what you want. It's what we need. Because if you don't, I'm gonna mess you up just the way your dad messed up your mom. You understand?
And it happened. Just like that. They said we were going to a truck stop. By then, I knew what that meant. I was scared. But I didn't know what to do. I should have never texted him. That was the night I pulled my first trick.
Gosh, you're so easy to talk to.
So are you. It's like we've known each other for a long time.
I can be myself around you. No games.
I know. I feel the same way. No one understands me like you do.
Same here.
I'm not appreciated here.
I appreciate you. You know what? Screw them.
I know, right?
I want to give you the world.
I can't wait to meet you.
Okay, you know how this works. Keep your cell phones on. Wait for my directions. Don't try to call anybody, because I'll know. Got that? What? Don't act nervous. Guys don't like that. Here. Take these. Focus. Let's go.
Hey, just take it. It'll chill you out. All right? Just make sure you look out for cops. Come on.
I love you. I want you to live with me.
I don't know.
Babe, don't you love me?
Of course I do, but I don't have a job and it's so expensive to live around here.
I'll go into my savings. I'll do whatever it takes. You're so worth it. What the hell are you crying for? You know we're in debt. Do you know how much money you owe me, bitch? Where you gonna go, huh? All you got. You gotta step it up.
I thought you loved me.
I do, but you're a big girl now, okay? If you really love me, you're gonna do this for me. Okay, you know how this works. Don't act nervous. Guys don't like that.
Hey, just take it. It'll chill you out.
Wow.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, that's just a depiction of what trafficking looks like. But I don't know if you picked up on things that were happening in that video, but it's like we get this Hollywood image of what it looks like to be trafficked. But as you saw in the video, it's like your daughter, it's your neighbor. It's, you know, they're dressed like an average teenager on a Friday night. And you can just see how it all comes together. And most of the women that we have worked with at Refuge for Women, this scenario here that you just saw is very much closer to the reality of what their story is, as opposed to some of the dramatic things we see on TV. This is what's happening every day in our backyards, in our neighborhoods. And so just really important to know that. And it should make us feel very heavy in our hearts and sick in our stomachs. And that's, I think, God stirring in us saying, like, this is not okay. We have to do something. We need to do something.
Yeah.
So
I think that one of the things that just stuck out is we don't see the underground. We only see the tip of the iceberg.
mhm,
Right. So we don't see everything that's happening underneath, but we get to see something that looks normal.
mhm,
It appears normal in every way. And I think that it's one of those things, like, you can see something on paper and it looks fine, but you know that there is a soul behind it. And I wrote down the coaching, what to say, isolation, the control. Those are things that you don't see on the surface,
right.
right? And so you wouldn't see it because they're isolated and because they're under somebody's control and because of the restrictions that they have, unless we're asking those type of questions, or unless you know what to look for, then you can't see it.
Right. Right. So
And I
good.
agree with Amy too, in that I think it, as a mom of young girls, it is the part where they start talking on a cell phone. And that's how she gets sucked into the whole thing. Like, young girls with their very first cell phone, like, the first thing they want is love texts from a boyfriend.
Yeah.
And I can see how that would be just such an easy way to just get sucked into something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if you picked it up in that depiction. It was like several texts in where she makes the statement and says, "I can't wait to meet you." Like she's having this entire conversation with a total stranger, and that happens all the time. So, like as a parent, I'm a parent of I have a daughter too, and like I just say to a parent, I don't care what your child says to you, you better be screening their phone. Like that's your responsibility as a parent. You screen that phone and you know who they're talking to and what they're saying, because the person that they're talking to on the other end of the phone is not even the person that they think it is. It's some 35-year-old creepy guy, you know? So like, yeah, invade their privacy, because they don't need privacy when they're 13. They don't need that. What they need is a parent checking their phone. So do it. So yeah, it gets scary. Here's just a list of kind of a repeat of some of the other stuff that we talked about, of ways that traffickers operate: through threatening your family. We saw that in that video clip. Through physical harm. We saw that in the video clip. Making those false promises of love, false promises of a job, of a home, really isolating from your family, from your friends. All of that are ways that traffickers are operating. So there's just so much that goes into it. So understanding the survivor. These are some characteristics of a trafficking victim, and some of these don't apply to us in general, but just keeping our eyes aware for things like this. So when trafficking victims often will be bounced around from provider to provider, meaning like doctor to doctor to doctor. So they never go back to the same place of service twice, because they don't want to have that record tracked. So that's just a red flag. If somebody has like multiple doctors, that can be a red flag. When they tell their story, if their story often changes midstream, the story changes, those can be some symptoms of being trafficked. Patterns of complaints, a lot of medication use can be symptoms of trafficking. But these are the things that really affect the women who are coming out of trafficking. There are so many psychological impacts on them that are just like, at Refuge for Women, we deal with this stuff on the daily. These are the things that we're working with our residents to help them overcome, because they all are results of the trauma that they have experienced through the sex industry. So a lot of anxiety, stress disorder, attachment disorder, conduct disorder, depression, eating disorders, self-harm is a huge indicator. It doesn't always mean that there's trafficking, but it is a result of trafficking. PTSD, every resident we have struggles and suffers from PTSD, a lot of anxiety issues, all those things that come along with that. Eating disorders, mood disorders, and then all of the personality disorders. There are so many women who get misdiagnosed as having a mental illness, and it's not a mental illness at all. It is a direct result of being trafficked and the trauma that their body and their brain has been under. And what we love about at Refuge for Women is we see so often women who come into us presenting with a lot of these mental health issues. And by the time they finish our program, these issues are, they're not completely gone, but they're able to control and able to really see the light at the end of the tunnel. And we say 100% that is the power of Jesus, that he can heal and he can take what the devil has meant for evil and the darkness that the women have been under and bring light to it and bring Jesus to it. And there's complete healing, not just of their physical bodies, but also of a lot of the mental trauma that goes along with being trafficked. There's some more listed there, just a lot of mental health concerns. There's a lot of things that we just need to be sensitive to when we're talking with someone who potentially we may think maybe they are being trafficked. Here's just a good list of some do's and don'ts as you're having those conversations. Just having that non-judgmental attitude and a grace-filled heart. It is so hard to step into someone else's shoes, right? We don't know their story. We don't know their journey. So if we can approach them with grace and non-judgmentally, that really helps. Always wearing a smile and a look of peace on your face. If you are a parent and you feel like your child is in danger of, or you're like they're in a relationship that has you really worried, or your red flags are up, we all know that if you attack them about their relationship, they're just going to go deeper into the relationship, right? It's the same with working with trafficking victims. Like we have to be the embodiment of the peace of the Holy Spirit as we talk to them, because that's what will help set them free. So speaking respectfully, sharing our story of how God has changed us, just listening to them intently, paying attention to the details that they're sharing with us. This one is super important, not over talking them. Every survivor has a story to share, but they have to be given space and time to be allowed to share that story. And we so often are afraid of silence. And so if there's silence, we fill it. And that's like the worst thing we can do. It's just so important when we're working with women to like embrace the silence and give them room to share their story. Encourage them to seek out and get help. Don't preach at them. Don't tell them what they're doing is wrong. They know all that. This one here is about not putting down their pimp is really important. And I think as parents, we can take this to heart too. We have to understand this bond. It's just a really weird thing that there is such a bond between a woman who is being trafficked and her pimp, and she will have her pimp's back to the nth degree. She will always have his back. And so understanding that, like there's a whole brainwashing, a whole manipulation that happens. If you attack their pimp, they're done. They're gonna back away and they are done. So just not putting down their pimp, not even going down that path, staying focused on her and where she's at. And that's just good for, if you're attacking your daughter's boyfriend, she's going to get defensive. So just remembering that, like, let's not even go down that path. Let's stay focused on them. And I love, Amy, at the start that you said, we're talking about souls. And that's so important to remember that, because when we're working with survivors, we're doing that too. And we're remembering, like, we're talking about the soul of a person here. So let's stay focused on them, stay focused on their soul. That's super important. So there's just a lot of things on here about just how we respond and how we react and how we relate to them. One of the things that was on the last slide, I went too fast, but it said, don't tell them that you understand if you don't. And unless you've walked in those shoes, you really don't understand. And so it's okay to say, I have no idea what you're going through. I have no idea. I don't know what it's like to be you, but I'm here. I'm here for you. That's a way to bridge that gap. Oftentimes survivors have tattoos. That's something that pimps do. They brand. Remember when we talked about them being in a stable? They brand their women so that other pimps know who they belong to. And so that's a lot of the women who come to Refuge for Women have branding tattoos. And so we always say that we never tell them that they have to cover them up or remove them. It has to be their choice and part of their healing process of when to do that. Another thing that seems very counterintuitive to us as followers of Jesus, because we're such lovers and we love to hug on people, is like, don't ever touch without permission. And so that's something that's just really important when you're working with women who have been trafficked, is if you do reach out to touch, they'll recoil. And so we just remember that, like they get to initiate that. And then nicknames are also something that can be very triggering to a woman who has been trafficked, because every woman who is trafficked doesn't use their real name. They all have fake names. They're given names by their pimp, and those names have great meaning in like where they fall in the line of women who belong to that pimp. And so we don't use nicknames at all. We use your real name. This is the name that you were given, and this is the name that we will call you. And so that's really important just to remember that. Some of these other ones all have to do with like working in a residential area. So all of these things are things that we do as we're working with women and helping them to get their life back and to being able to live independently. So here's just some real quick facts about human trafficking globally and in Clark County, which would be Las Vegas. So it's an estimated $150 billion worldwide industry of human trafficking, which is higher than Google, Amazon, and Starbucks. And that, remember, most of human trafficking is underground. So this is human trafficking that has been exposed. You can only imagine how big that number really is, because most of it goes underground. Sex trafficking is $99 billion worldwide, 9.8 million per year in the United States, over 5 million a year in Las Vegas is spent in the sex industry. I love this statistic because I think it brings it home for us. 92% of women who are involved in the sex industry say that they want to escape or they would do something different, but they have no other means of survival. And that's just really important, because if a woman does not feel like she can get a job, if she does not feel like she can take care of herself, if she does not feel like she has a way to have a steady income, then she's going to be more trapped than a woman who feels like she's capable of standing on her own 2 feet. So 92% of the women who are working in the sex industry don't want to be there. That's staggering. Las Vegas is ranked the number 4 in the nation for the number of calls made to the National Human Trafficking Hotline. An average pimp has 4 to 6 girls working for them, and they make anywhere from $5,000 to $32,000 a week. So that, if you do the math, is anywhere from $260,000 to over $1.5 million a year. That's how much money a pimp makes. 80% of trafficking victims are female, and 50% of trafficking victims are under the age of 18, and 70% of traffickers are male, which means 30% of traffickers are female. So women are trafficked by women. It's not only by men. Here's just some stats about the cases that were identified in 2019 in Clark County. There were 116 minors identified, 114 were female, 2 were male. Gives you the breakdown of ethnicity of those groups. 22% of children that were recovered in 2019 were recovered on the Strip. They were working on the Strip. 82 of them were runaways, and 3 of them were 13 years of age or younger. 113 were between the ages of 14 and 17. And 102 of the 116, 102 were locals. So these are kids who live in Las Vegas who are being trafficked in Las Vegas. So it's not like they're kidnapped in Minnesota and brought to Las Vegas. Like, these are local kids, 102. In 2019, 10 children a month were identified as victims of sex trafficking. But again, these numbers seem low when you look at the numbers, but we have to remember most cases of trafficking are undetected. It is an underground crime. So it's not, these are children who were identified. And then there were 139 cases of adult sex trafficking. 74 victims, all were female. 19% of them were between the ages of 18 to 24, and then the breakdown of what their ethnicity was. So these are the different areas that are considered to be the sex industry. When we talk about working in the sex industry, it can be online, it can be street walking, massage parlors, brothels, truck stops, escort services, strip shows, adult bookstores, dancing and strip clubs, sex tourism, survival sex, sex rings, and the porn industry. So at Refuge for Women, we serve women who come out of all of these areas. It's not just limited to one area. So I think we asked this question earlier, right, Amy? Do you feel sex trafficking is a problem in your city? What were the answers to that question?
The answers were yes, and I don't know. I can share those.
Oh yeah, right there. Yeah.
So almost half of our crowd says, I don't know.
Yeah. And that's not surprising, because I mean, I've said it several times, like, the sex industry is underground, right? It is happening all around us, but we don't see it. And when when we don't do something like this and take time to educate ourselves about what it is and what it looks like, it's so easy to just go about our life and live as if it's not there. And, but yet we know that it is, right? And so, it's easy to not see it if we're not like training our eyes to look for it. This morning, I was in a chamber meeting for Henderson, and I shared just a little bit about Refuge for Women. And after, there were 4 of us in a little chat room after the meeting, and one of the ladies there, she said, "Oh, I don't know why, but I just had no idea that sex trafficking was such a problem in Las Vegas." And I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, like, do you know where you live? But we can get in our bubble, right? Or we can just be about what we're doing, and we don't recognize that it's everywhere. And it's not just Las Vegas, it is everywhere.
And one of the questions came up, how are the numbers now that schools aren't open?
Yeah, I don't have an answer to that other than we know that the suicide rate is way higher, depression rate is way higher in children than it has been in years past. And those kinds of things, when children are isolated, when they're depressed, when they're feeling that separation from people, they're completely vulnerable. So we know that online not trafficking, but online traffic in the sex industry is increasing exponentially. The porn sites are increasing like crazy because of online stuff. So, I mean, I don't have anything to back it up, but I think the answer has to be it's on the rise, but I don't know the actual numbers to put with that.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
It's just staggering, Robin.
Yeah.
And here's kind of where, for me, it should be. And I was raised in a generation of scared straight.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that is where we need to land. Like, we need to be scared straight when we're talking about human trafficking and when we're talking about sex trafficking. Like, that, it is so imperative that this scares us to action in our lives. And I hope that happens.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a great lead in into like, what can we do? Like, as an individual person, what can I do? So I want to talk about that for just a little bit. So things to look for. Does the person, and this is like just keep your eyes open with your neighbors, with people in church, with the youth group, as you're looking around. Like, these are things that we should be watching for. Does the person appear disconnected from family, friends, community organizations, or houses of worship? Has a child stopped attending school? Has the person had a sudden or dramatic change in behavior? That's what was the trigger to my friend with his daughter. He was like, who is this person? Like, where did my daughter go? Something happened that her behavior was just shifting, and it caught his eye. Thank God it caught his eye, and he investigated and got down to it. Is the juvenile engaged in commercial sex acts? Is the person disoriented or confused? Do they show signs of mental or physical abuse? Do they have bruises on their body that there's no explanation for? Do they appear fearful or timid or submissive? All of these things they don't mean that they are being trafficked, but they can be. They're indicators. They're things that we just need to train ourselves to pay attention to. Do they look as if they're being denied care? Are they in the company of someone that they defer to? Like, that person answers for them all the time. Especially if you have a child who's like dating age, we really need to pay attention to these kind of behaviors in dating relationships. When you start dating somebody and you no longer are allowed to use your phone whenever you want, like they have control over your phone, or they control where you go, they control who your friends are. Those are all red flags that we need to, and these are things like we need to train our children. Like, this is not okay in a relationship. So if you're dating somebody and he's asking you to do this is not okay. You need to say no. Do they appear to be coached as to what to say? Where are they living? Is it safe? Do they have what they need to be taken care of? So all of these things are just things to pay attention to in relationships, in friendships that we have, in people that we come into contact with. Do they appear to be afraid to speak for themselves? You know, all of these things are indicators that something's wrong, something's off. We need to pay attention. The last one is really important. Does this person all of a sudden have unexplained new things? Like they're getting gifts and there's no explanation for how they got them. So that's a way of a pimp manipulating and grooming someone to come into his fold, is showering them with gifts, lavish gifts, to get them to be submissive to them. So things that you can ask somebody that are okay to ask. Are you being paid for what you do? Where do you sleep and eat? What kind of work do you do? Does someone keep your pay? Are you allowed to keep your own money? How often do you get to go to the doctor? Can you come and go from where you are as you please? Do you need someone's permission to come and go? Have you been threatened? Has your family been threatened? If you wanted to leave your job, could you? Those are questions that get at if they are being trafficked. Here, these are the numbers for the National Human Trafficking Hotline that are good to know that you can call for help or questions or give to other people. And then I also threw on there our website for this is how women get into our program. They go online and fill out our application, and that's how they get into our program. This is kind of an interesting thing, that the National Human Trafficking Hotline, I don't think a lot of people realize this, but if you're in a metro area, the National Human Trafficking Hotline links itself to your local crisis center or your local police. So if a woman in Las Vegas called the 800 number for the National Human Trafficking Hotline, it takes them directly to our RISE Center, which is our hub for emergent care for women who are being trafficked. So the calls actually stay local. So it's not like they're calling an 800 number in New York City and then it's being rerouted back to wherever it is that they need help. Those numbers really go right straight to the local area to get them help, which is kind of cool.
Wow.
So let me tell you a little bit about Refuge for Women. I've just mentioned it a little bit throughout, but we are a faith-based long-term residential care program for women who are coming out of the sex industry. So our program is 9 months long that the women come to us. They live in our home. We walk with them from that point of entry until we walk through their stabilization from what they've come through counseling and trauma-informed courses and care. And then we do job and life skills. And then our final phase, we focus on education and employment. And then after they complete our 9-month program, we have a second house that they have the option that they could move into if they choose to. And that's a 1-year transitional living home that they can live in while they're going to school or while they're working. So it gives them a total of 21 months of supported care underneath them while they're walking through this process of recovery after coming out of the sex industry. So Refuge for Women was started in 2009 by Ked Frank. He's our founder, and it was started in Lexington, Kentucky. And Ked's story is very similar to mine, that his heart was, him and his wife, they were a part of a strip club ministry where the men stayed outside and prayed and the women went inside. And they were very spurred on by the Lord that if a woman wanted help, they have to have a place to go. And so Ked and his wife started Refuge for Women and opened the very first home in Kentucky in 2010. We were the first offshoot of that in Las Vegas, and we opened our first home in November of 2015. We opened our transitional home in July of 2019. We've had this, I need to update this slide. This says 6. We've actually had 7 graduations since we've opened, and we've had 18, I believe, women graduate from our program. And many of them are staying local, living in Las Vegas, working. We just had one of our graduates on Monday of this week just got married. And so that was an exciting time to see her whole life has been turned around. And that's awesome when we see that happen. So here's the mission statement for Refuge for Women, that we want to empower sexually exploited women to live a life of freedom through faith-based residential healing programs. Our program is offered to women free of charge. They don't pay anything to go through our 9 months. We provide everything that they need as far as down to shampoo and soap. Like everything they need is provided for them so that they can really focus solely on their healing and getting their life back. And so that's kind of the way our program works. So here's just a little snapshot of what it looks like as the women progress through the phases. We really focus on just taking them from those initial needs that they have when they're coming out of the life, and getting their feet back underneath them, and the life skills, the job skills, down to the simple things of how to do laundry, how to meal plan, how to budget, how to grocery shop, all of those things that we normally realize that people learn along the way. Most women who have been trafficked, they've never done any of those things. So we spend a lot of time teaching them those basic life skills, basic survival skills, so that when they graduate, they feel equipped and ready to stand on their own 2 feet. And so that's just kind of the overview of the program. One of the things that I love about Refuge for Women is that we don't go anywhere. So when the women complete our program and they're graduated and they're out living on their own or whatever, we're still there for them. So when they come to Refuge, they are part of Refuge for the rest of their life. They have us as their backup. So we continue to pay for their counseling as long as they feel that they need it. We have gals who graduated from our program 3 years ago, and we're still providing their counseling for them. So that's just something that I really love about the commitment of Refuge, is that we're going to walk with women. We're going to walk through life with them. We don't just do a 9-month program and then say, see you later. So I love that. I'm pretty proud of that. So our 4 core values are that we want to make sure every woman who comes into our home experiences safety, healing, is met face to face with Jesus, that faith piece, and that they grow from where they're at to where God has designed them and called them to be. So that's what we do. Here's just some numbers of the number of women that we've served. That should be that have graduated. This is in 2020. So this year alone, this is just through September. We had 17 women come through our program. We provided 2,077 nights of shelter, 316 counseling sessions, 329 advocacy or support meetings, 710 support group sessions, and 1,120 rides to doctor's appointments or church or other things. So these are things that people can do to get involved. That first one is become a monthly hope builder. Our hope builders are our financial partners. They are people who see what we're doing and they love our mission and they say, I want to support you. And so our website is up there, and you can become a monthly partner where you donate and you say, okay, I'm going to pledge this dollar amount every month. And you know that it's going directly to the service to help these women and to help them get their lives back. The second thing is to become a prayer warrior. We do a monthly prayer call for Refuge for Women on the first Monday of every month. And it's at 7 p.m. and it's only 30 minutes long. And we have people join that prayer call from across the country, and they jump on that call and just cover the ministry in prayer. And that is so important. We are working in a very, very dark world, and our staff and our volunteers need to be covered from head to toe with the blood of Jesus, because we are stepping into it every single day. And I'm reminding my staff all the time, every time you show up for work, you're making the devil mad, because we're reclaiming lives that he has taken, and that doesn't make him happy. So we need to be covered in prayer. Becoming a Refuge ambassador is a huge thing. So our ambassadors, what they do is they host a meeting in their home, very similar to something like this, and invite your friends. And then we come and share the Refuge story. Not all of this. This was way longer than an ambassador meeting, but we come and just share the Refuge story of who we are and what we're doing. And it's a way that we can let more people know that there are ministries out there serving women, and we want people to know about Refuge so that they can get on board and help us in this ministry of serving women. And then the final thing, something you can do, is become a church partner. So our biggest base of support is our church partners. And so church partners say, we want to sponsor you. We want to help you do what you're doing. And so they provide monthly support. They pray for us, and they provide ongoing awareness to their congregations of just saying, hey, this is real. Trafficking exists. We need to have our foot in that door. We need to be working to solve it. So let's partner with Refuge and help them do what they're doing. We have church partners for the Las Vegas location. that are all over the place. I have a church partner in Ohio, a church partner in Michigan. So it's not like you have to be in Las Vegas to be a church partner. You can be a church partner anywhere. So those are just things that you can do to help and to get involved. Not everybody can be a volunteer in the home. The volunteers in the home are very limited because it's small and it's intimate and there's just not that much room to have a lot of volunteers, but there is something that everyone can do to be involved. So not everybody's called to be a volunteer on the front lines with this line of work. That's just not what everybody's gifting is, but there's something that everybody can do. So I just listed on here, Amy asked me if I could come up with a couple of videos that you can watch that give you more information. So these are 4 videos that are out there that dig a little bit deeper into this topic that you might want to just take a picture of the screen so you've got them, that really dive into what trafficking and sex trafficking looks like in the United States and how it impacts people. So there's just some up there for you.
Awesome.
And that's the end of what I have to share. That was a lot.
That's okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of jump into, let's see, this will stop sharing. Oh, there we go.
Yep.
So we had some questions come up. And first of all, I want to go back to, first of all, that we've been asking a lot of people for, they've been asking for this information. And Robin, is it okay if I can give out some of these statistics and some of these slides?
Yep, I just answered on there too. Yeah, you've got the slide thing, give it to anybody you want.
Okay, perfect. Yep. So if you email me at women@JourneyKingman or emeo@JourneyKingman.com, then I can work on getting and putting some of this together for you so that it's available. We had a couple of questions. Who does the counseling?
Yeah, we partner with the Renewing Life Center, which is a Christian based counseling firm that literally is a mile from our program house. And so we outsource counseling. So we take the women there to the counseling center and we use one counselor there so that one counselor sees all of the women in our program and they each go for 1 hour a week with her. And then if needed, they can go twice a week. But yeah, so we use professional licensed therapists who are trained in trauma recovery.
Perfect.
Mm-hmm.
What happens if they are drug addicted?
Yep. 96% of the women who come to our program have an addiction. So we have a very heavy drug and alcohol education component to our program. So we hit that hard. We also require all of the women in our home, whether they have an addiction or not, they go to 2 support meetings a week. So we go to Celebrate Recovery. They go to 2 different ones at 2 different locations, so they get different feels for it. Even in our transitional home, after they graduate and move out, they're required to do a minimum of 1 support group a week, but then they can choose whichever one they want to go to. But that's very, very real because as you saw in that video, like that's how pimps keep girls up for days and days and days. Like it's very, very rare that anyone is involved in the sex industry and is not also using drugs.
Candy asked, is this in-house or out of house? Meaning your program is an in-house program.
Yes, in-house. So yeah, residential. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. We have a couple of other ones. Are there any statistics on boys or teenagers being trafficked?
Yeah, the only stats I have on teens are those ones that I put in the slide about Clark County for 2019. And that's really my bad because we don't deal with minors. So I really stay focused on women 18 and older. But I'm sure there are stats out there. If you were to go to the website polaris.org, Polaris.org, the Polaris Project is kind of the leaders in the research and statistics for trafficking, and they have tons of stats on their website. And so I'm sure there would be stuff out there on minors and particularly males.
So while doing research for this, as a whole world, the average age of a teen that enters the sex trade is 12 to 14 years old.
Mhm.
And many victims are runaway girls who have been sexually abused at some point in time.
Mhm.
So that was the information just to answer that. And she asked about children. Ginny asked about, are they allowed to have children with them in your
In
program?
our program? Yeah, let me answer that. But before I do, going back to what you just shared, Amy,
Mhm.
the other stat that goes along with that, that's just staggering, is that most runaways are approached by a pimp within 24 hours. It's that quick that they're approached by a pimp within 24 hours. So we had a resident in our program 3-4 years ago, and she was a runaway. She was a foster kid, came up through the system. When she was 14 years old, she ran from her foster home, and within a mile of the house that she ran from, she was picked up by 5 guys in a car, and they said, "Oh, we'll give you a ride." And she got in the car. And 16 years later, she was rescued. 16 years of being trafficked. She was rescued on her 30th birthday.
Wow.
But she was picked up within a mile of her house within leaving. So yeah, it's staggering how it's staggering what happens to runaways. So
Yeah.
the answer to the question about children is we do not have children in our program, but we have a partnership with an organization here in Vegas called Safe Families. And so it's foster care through the church. That's not like official foster care, but it's medical guardianship is what they use. And so if we ever had a woman who wanted to come to us who had custody of her children, and she was willing to let her kids live under the care of a foster family while she went through the program, we partner with Safe Families, and then the mom and the kids can have contact and see each other while she does the program. But that family from the church takes care of those kids while the mom does the program.
Awesome.
Yeah, most of the women who come to a lot of the women have children, but most of them, by the time they come to our program, they don't have custody. So their kids are with another family member, or they've been removed from them, or whatever. Very rarely do we have a woman come to us who actually has custody of her kids.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. I know that Kim Canto had a question. Kim, are you here? Let me see. Kim Canto. If I allow you to talk, would you be willing to ask your question? Let's see. Let's see if she's here. I know she had a question that she emailed me.
Mm.
Let's see. We'll see if she pops up and asks her question. She had a good question, but I can't see it. While we're waiting, what steps should I take if I see a situation that looks like trafficking?
Yeah. So you can always call that 800 number for the trafficking hotline and report it to them, and they will investigate if it warrants them. They'll ask you some questions, and if it warrants them investigating, they will investigate. But also sometimes it's a matter of like that list of those questions that I had posted, where maybe start the conversation. Like, do you have the ability to come and go as you want? Like asking some of those questions. Another thing is just making sure that if you have a relationship with that person, if you don't know that person, it's just something that you're seeing, out there, and you think, oh, that doesn't look good. The best thing to do is 911, like call the authorities and let them know, or call the human trafficking hotline, and they'll redirect it to the right people. But if you have a relationship with that person, just reassuring them that there's help for you. There are people who can help if this is really happening in your life, and making sure that they know like that you're there for them, you're willing to help them, that they can get help. They're not going to accept it on the spot, but they're going to think about it.
Right. And Kim's question was, what countries have the highest trafficking? And one of the things that I learned was California, Texas, and Florida are the 3 of the highest trafficked areas for 18 and younger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, we actually have 2 homes in Texas, and Texas is like just a hot spot. And Atlanta too. Atlanta is a huge hub of trafficking. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So we'll see if we can get some more information on that for you, Kim. But so I have a list here of what we can do, and so just as a church awareness, this is step number 1. We're already doing it. I think that as a group of in a ministry, we can look at our laws. What do our laws actually say about this? And I think it'd be really smart for us in Kingman to figure out what we do need to do, and what we could do. And I think changing our culture is a really big thing. I just watched called a documentary, and it's free on Netflix right now, either Netflix or Prime, one of the two. And it is called Stopping Traffic. It is a phenomenal resource, and they give a ton of things that we can and can't do, changing the culture, which is what we're doing right now. And I think the question on what local resources do we have, I think that's something, because this is the conversation starter, we're going to be looking at what do we have here and how can we do that. So that's something that I think we need to keep talking about. And I think that some type of awareness group here would be phenomenal. And if we have that, then I would love for our group to be a part in some way, shape, or form. And what is our area of influence? I think that that's a huge, how can we do something in our culture, in our circle of influence? That's a really big deal to what we can do right now. Being aware is huge, because if we're aware of what's going on and we have some resources available, then we have things in our back pocket. It's like having an ace in your pocket and going, oh my gosh, is this the time, Lord? And asking the Holy Spirit to go, help me understand this right now. So I think that some of the information, coaching our kids in relationship, that was one of the things that came out when you were talking about, we need to coach our kids in what a real relationship looks like. I think, Liz has 3 daughters, and I have our church is full of families. And so, what does that look like for you, Liz, to be able to teach your girls, coaching them on what a real relationship looks like, so that they also are aware? And I know you have middle schoolers to elementary, so you want to speak on that?
Well, I think a really big part is teaching girls that you have a right to control your own body. And I've said this to some of my friends before. A lot of times younger siblings get pushed around a lot by their older siblings. And I have noticed that a lot of younger siblings end up getting themselves in trouble. They turn into like the black sheep of the family. And how often has the younger child in the family been told, you can't do this, you can't play with us, you have to come over here, you have to do that. And they don't have a lot of autonomy over the own choices that they make. And so for my girls, I make it a big point that if you say no, no means no. Like, your siblings must respect your no's. You should be able to use your voice in your own home to stand up for what you need. Don't say no if you don't mean no. That's not a funny word to play with. It's a serious word. And if you want somebody to stop means stop. And give them the courage among themselves to be able to stand up for themselves. And then hopefully they will be able to take that same strength into their relationships with other people that they know. And so I'm a real firm believer in, your sister just told you that. You must listen. Like, you have to respect other people's bodies and what they say and what their wants and desires are, and not just brush over it because, it's just family, we're all going to do this. It's like, no, they said they really didn't want to. And if they have a good reason for it, we need to really listen. And so I think a lot of that starts at home, and it's super easy to brush over. But I think siblings need to learn to respect each other's no's and each other's stops, just as much as you would with strangers.
That's good. It's really good. Do you have any closing remarks for us, Robin?
No, I just think I love what you guys are doing, and just that you're wanting to learn more and be more educated. And I just say, like, don't be afraid to get involved. Don't be afraid to step into it and see where God takes you as a church for what you're going to do. So I think it's great that you're even having this conversation is awesome.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty big deal.
Mhm.
And I do know that our culture struggles with isolation. Our culture struggles with sin, and our culture struggles with calling it out.
Mm.
And so I feel like as a church community, I want to lay a foundation for what we're doing, and our reaching out and our outreach needs to be in support of actually what is going on, not something that we can't see, because we know, just because, it's kind of like the wind, like we can see the effects of the wind, but we can't see the wind. And so we have to look into our city and our culture and go, this is happening.
Mm-hmm.
We see the effects of it. We see and I looked at that list of all of the stuff that are the mental illnesses and mental health. And we look at all that and go, that is happening.
Mm-hmm.
We see the effects and the symptoms. And so we have to address the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to be a culture that is created to be able to say this is happening. And so I feel like that's what we're doing right now, and just saying, okay, it's there. And how do we keep that rolling? And how do we create a community that is available to even talk about it? And so I'm really grateful that we're starting that process.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's just healthy, and I don't want to not see it. I don't want to bury my head in the sand, and I don't want to say nothing's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And so, because it's affecting all of the people around us, and that is our circle of influence. So I'm really grateful that we have the conversation, and I'm looking forward to kind of diving into it more. And I know that this is a hot topic for a lot of the people that are on this call. And so one thing that we can do is maybe plan not only to get this information out, but maybe another meeting about this, and with some of the people, and maybe we can have some volunteers get together and talk and pray, and maybe jump on one of your prayer calls, and just keep this on the surface.
Yeah.
So I would like to do that. And I just want to say thank you to Robin. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. And I'm looking forward to kind of diving into this a little bit more and see what we can do in our city, because I think that we truly have some venue to do that.
Yeah.
So I'm ready for that. So got any closing thoughts, Liz?
I think one of my biggest takeaways is that what you started with talking about Mother Teresa, going home and actually loving your own family. There's a lot that all of us can do, like tonight, when you kiss your kids before you put them to bed, that can set them on a track of not being trafficked. And I think if all of us poured into our families, you're gonna have a whole culture of women who are going to rise up, who are going to be stronger, who are not going to be as vulnerable. And so I would encourage everybody to be that person right now to the people around you who are in your circle, and love on the women, and build them up and encourage them in their own strengths, and help them not be vulnerable and be isolated in a time like this, just among the people that you know. And that's something that you could do tonight and tomorrow and the next day, so that you don't feel like you have to wait to take action.
Yeah, amen to that, for sure. I think that as we wrap this up, I just want to say that everyone that's on this call, I know everyone's really ecstatic that we get to do this. And so I just want to bring over just for this evening, the moment we get off this, I just want everybody to stop and pray for a minute for the souls that are happening. And wherever you're with, I know we have some watch parties going on and stuff. And so whoever you're with, if you could just stop and pray for the souls that are behind the clothing and the trauma and the vulnerability and all of the things that are happening. And we could just break some of the bonds of the enemy, and that we are not going to stand for being ignorant or being aware. We are going to be aware that this is happening, and we're going to start praying. So I love you guys. I feel like we are in a really good spot, and I'm very excited about what the future holds, that we can just keep this rolling. So just as a note, thanks for coming to the Grove. We hope you enjoyed it. And tomorrow, there is a men's event tomorrow morning at 8:30 in the morning. It is a conversation. It's called Coffee and Conversation. Comes out at 8:30 on Journey. And it is an incredible conversation with my husband, Dennis, and Scott Lander, what happened in 2020. So you guys can tune in for that as well. So I love you guys, and stop and pray. And we love you, and have an incredible evening. Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.